Hi there. This is a video about formulas using coordinate points, okay? And so in this, the first thing I want to talk about is just coordinate points, all right? Typically when we have coordinate points, we have an x value and we have a y value, all right? In each of these, we're going to be talking about using the x sub 1 value and the y sub 1 value and say x sub 2 comma y sub 2. All right. What this means is that this is my first point, all right, first point, and that this is our second point. All right, that's where the 1s and the 2s come in. All right, every point has an x and y value, but we got to distinguish between those. All right, so the first formula that I want to talk about is our slope formula. All right, so m is equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. All right, and all I'm doing is using these points to calculate our slope. Now remember that slope, all right, let's write this, that this is slope, okay? This is a measure of steepness, okay? And you have 4 kinds of slope. You have a positive slope, a negative slope, a zero slope, and an undefined slope. So if you see a line that's going in this direction, you have a positive slope. Going in this direction, negative. Going horizontal is 0, and up and down is undefined. Now again, we can also talk about slope as the concept of rise over run, also known as the change in change in y divided by the change in x. Okay, so let's look at an example. Okay, so on this first example, I just want to calculate the slope between the pair of points, okay? And so I just first want to write down our formula. M is equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now I'm going to label these points as x1, y1, x2, y2. Always. I always do that. All right, and if I want to plug that into my formula, I'm going to take y sub 2, which is negative 5, and I'm going to subtract y sub 1, which is negative 7. Okay, and I'm using negative numbers to give you kind of a weird example here. Let's jump in here and do x sub 2. That's negative 18. And then minus negative 2. All right, so regardless of the values, I just want to make sure that I'm always subtracting these. All right, so the next step down, I would want to say that m is equal to negative 5 plus 7 over negative 18 plus 2. All right, and so once I evaluate this, I want to get, negative 5 plus 7, that's a value of 2. And then negative 18 plus 2 has a value of negative 16. Now, each of these numbers are divisible by 2, so I can simplify this. And I'm going to end up getting that my slope is equal to 1 over negative 8. All right, and you can write that, you can put that negative wherever. All right, you can put that as negative 1 over 8, or you could even write that out to the side and put the 8 down below. Okay, so however you want to write that, all 3 of these things mean the same thing. All right. Okay, on this next example, I want to find the missing variable so that the line through the points has the given slope. So we have 2 points here, all right, but I don't know the y value of my first point, so we have to figure out what that is. And then I have my second point, and we have our slope. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, and I'm going to substitute all these numbers into our formula here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call this x1, y1, x2, y2, and this is my m value. So when I plug all this stuff into, all these numbers into our formula here, I'm going to get negative 3/7 is equal to negative 5 minus y over negative 2 minus a negative 9. Now what I'm going to do is I'm now going to solve this equation over here for y. All right, and there's a couple of ways that I can do this. All right, when I look at this equation, all right, I've got negative 3/7 is equal to negative 5 minus y over, I'm going to rewrite this as negative 2 plus 9. All right, and so from here, I've got negative 3/7 is equal to negative 5 minus y over negative 2 plus 9 is positive 7. Okay, now I can do this problem two different ways. Okay, let me show you guys the first way. And the first way that I would want to do this is by cross multiplying. So I can cross multiply each of these 7s. And so I can do negative 3 times positive 7, which gives us negative 21. All right, and then I would want to take 7 and multiply it by this entire quantity here. So 7 times negative 5 minus y. All right, let's distribute this 7 on the right side. So we get negative 35 minus 7y. So in order to solve this, I'd want to add 35 to both sides. All right, and that's going to end up giving me positive 14 is equal to negative 7y. Now I'm going to divide by negative 7, divide by negative 7, and I'm going to get that y is equal to negative 2. All right, and that's my answer. Okay, this is kind of like your fail-safe method. This is kind of the way you'd always want to do it. But the other way I want to look at this is by analyzing the fact that I have the same denominator in these equations. Okay, if my denominators are the same and I have two fractions equal to each other, then I simply just want to look at the top part of my equation and write this as negative 3 equals negative 5 minus y. Now, if I add 5 to both sides here and solve this equation, all right, we're going to get that 2 is equal to negative y. Now, remember that having a negative y is really like having negative 1 times y is equal to 2. Let's divide both sides by negative 1 here, and I get that y is equal to negative 2. So however you want to solve that equation, you can do it that way. I would recommend, fail-safe way of doing it is always by cross-multiplying. The next formula I want to talk about is the midpoint formula. And what we have, given 2 points, x sub 1 comma y sub 1 and x sub 2 comma y sub 2, what I want to do is use these points and say x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2 comma y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. And that's going to generate the midpoint between 2 points, all right? All right, so let's calculate the midpoint between these 2 points, all right? And I'm going to do all the math, and then I'll show you the graph of what this looks like. All right, so first thing I want to do is label this as x1, y1, x2, y2, all right? And I'm going to substitute these numbers into this formula. So from here, what I want to do is replace x sub 1 with negative 5 plus negative 1, which is x sub 2 over 2, comma, let's do 6 plus negative 10, then all over 2. And what I want to do, once it's in this form, notice how the formula itself is a coordinate value. When I do all the math here, add these two numbers and divide by 2, that's my x value of my midpoint. When I add these two numbers here and divide by 2, that's the y value of my midpoint. So from here, I've got negative 6 over 2, comma, negative 4 over 2, and we then get the point of negative 3 comma negative 2. And this is my answer. This is my midpoint between the two endpoints. All right, now what I want to do is I'm going to take all 3 of these points, this point, and this point, and we're going to graph them, and so you can see what this looks like on a graph. All right, so now that I have a graph, I'm going to plot the point negative 5, positive 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the left, up 6 to the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Plot a point right there. Okay, and this isn't perfect, but that's the idea. Negative 1, negative 10 is going to be to the left 1 and then down 10, which is going to be right here. And then we have the point negative 3, negative 2. Now, if we go to the left, 1, 2, 3, down 2. What we've done is we have this segment, all right, this initial segment that has been cut in half, all right? This is the halfway point, or also known as the midpoint, all right? And that's what you're calculating. Okay, the next thing I want to do is find the endpoint given the midpoint and one other endpoint. All right, so if you're given one endpoint, I'm going to call this x sub 1, y sub 1. All right, I am looking for the other endpoint, looking for x sub 2 comma y sub 2. Okay, now I want to use my formula here, x1 plus x2 over 2, comma y1 plus y2 over 2. All right, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to substitute my numbers in, and the first thing I want to do, we have to do these separately. All right, let's solve for x sub 2. All right, let's figure out what that is. What I want to do is I want to use this entire expression here, plug my numbers in, and figure out what x sub 2 is. All right, so I know what x sub 1 is. That's negative 8. So I'm going to do negative 8 plus x sub 2 divided by 2 is going to now be equal to the x value of my midpoint. All right, so that's this value here. All right, and that's going to be 2. All right, now similarly, what I want to do is solve for y sub 2. All right, so let's put this line down the middle. Let's set up an equation for y sub 2. All right, and so I want to use this part of my formula. I'm going to do y sub 1, which that value is 6. So 6 plus y sub 2 over 2 is going to be equal to the y value of my midpoint, which in this case is negative 5. Okay, and so what we're going to do is solve each of these equations. All right, and the first thing that we want to do is to get rid of this 2 in the denominator. When you see a number in the denominator and you want to move it to the other side, simply multiply both sides by that number 2. So that's going to divide out. You're going to be left with negative 8 plus x sub 2 is equal to 4. Add 8 to both sides, and we get that x sub 2 is equal to 12. Now, this is the x value of my other endpoint. All right. Now, let's solve this equation for y sub 2, the y value of my other endpoint. Let's multiply both sides of this equation by 2, same thing that we just did, and that's going to give us 6 plus y sub 2 is equal to negative 10. Let's subtract 6 from both sides, and that's going to give us y sub 2 is equal to negative 16. All right, and that's the y value of my other endpoint. All right, so what I then want to do is write our answer. So our endpoint, all right, that we're looking for is the point 12 comma negative 16. All right, and that is our answer for that. The last formula that we have is the distance formula. And given 2 points, x sub 1 comma y sub 1 and x sub 2 comma y sub 2, the distance formula is given as such. So d is equal to the square root of y sub 2 minus y sub 1 quantity squared plus x sub 2 minus x sub 1 quantity squared. All right, and that's our distance formula. Now, if we wanted to calculate the distance between 2 points, all right, let's say we've got the points 5, 8, and negative 3, comma 2. All right, and so what I want to do is plug these numbers into our distance formula. First things first, let's label this as x1, y1, x2, y2. All right, and as I plug these into our distance formula, we're going to get that our distance is equal to the square root of quantity. Let's do 2 minus 8 quantity squared plus, what do we got here? We got negative 3 minus 5, that quantity squared. Now, we got to be really careful about our signs and how we write this, but all this is now, we just got to do the math, arrive at a number, and evaluate. Okay, so from here, inside the parentheses, I'm going to do 2 minus 8. That's going to give me negative 6 quantity squared. Plus, negative 3 minus 5 gives us negative 8, that quantity squared. Now, again, I'm going to copy everything else down. Now, the distance here, negative 6 squared, is negative 6 times negative 6, which is positive 36. plus negative 8 times negative 8, that's negative 8 squared, that's going to give me positive 64. Now, one thing to always know is that regardless of whether your numbers here are negative or positive, when you square those numbers, they're always going to become positive, all right? So then our distance then is going to be equal to, let's add the numbers underneath. We get the square root of 100. That's a number that we can evaluate. And so then the distance is then equal to 10. So the distance between those 2 points is 10 units, all right? And that's the idea. So hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.